All right, good afternoon, everybody. I am Jeff Colton, senior reporter with City and State, and thank you all so much for joining the first read coronavirus update focused on the effect on industry. This is our second in this series, which we're co-producing with the Office of the Counsel to the Mayor, and it's pretty exciting opportunity to just kind of learn about what's going on with coronavirus and get a lot of questions answered for those that are closely following, particularly the effect on small businesses like restaurants, bars, theaters, and all the long-term closings and restrictions that we've dealt with for the past 11 months, 11 and a half months. Again, I'm Jeff Colton, senior reporter. I'm coming here, tuning in from the Upper West Side, where my apartment is just down the street from two closed stores, a coffee shop and a small retail business that both closed during the pandemic. And I'm sure that people across the city have the same story. But at the same time, just on the other side, a store just opened, a small business. So there's good, there's bad, there's change. We're going to talk all about it. I want to thank Affinity Health Plan and the East Midtown Partnership for their continued support of city and state events and for sponsoring this event today. And a note for everybody watching, whether on Zoom or Facebook, that we are going to try and do a Q&A, take some questions from the audience at the end. If you have questions, please submit those into the Zoom Q&A, and I will do my best to pick some of the best ones if we have some time at the end and ask our panelists. So speaking of our panelists, I want to introduce them. This is the effect on coronavirus update, effect on industry. We're going to be talking to some of the top advisors within City Hall. I'm going to give them each a chance to kind of introduce themselves. First is Jonnel Doris, Commissioner of New York City Department of Small Business Services. I feel like I've been doing panels with Jonnel going back like 5 years. I've watched his career advance up through City Hall. So it's great that he's now a commissioner. So Jonnel, you first. I mean, as a commissioner of SBS, tell us briefly about the role that your agency has played during the pandemic.
Jeff, well, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you to my colleagues at City Hall for their work and what they're doing, fellow panelists here. And really, at SBS, really two buckets where, our agency sort of pivoted and things that we had to do. First was around advocacy for small businesses. I mean, we've been doing that work for some time, but really, move into a next level on city, state, federal, advocacy around the federal stimulus, the rent ceiling, within the particular stimulus in the beginning, how we can actually help and move and advance information from the small businesses to the agencies and, on the federal level and state and city level, and make sure that they're getting the input from the small business community. Also advocated on, inclusion of, CDFIs or community development financial institutions in the federal packages, targeted policies for small businesses, the Restaurant Revitalization Act, pushing that on the federal level, and something we've just been pushing from the beginning, the business interruption insurance, which many small businesses who are listening to us today know that they're unable to access because, of whatever clause within their particular insurance policy. And so advocating to make sure that small businesses have their voices heard within policies that are developing, and also from a broader sort of industry on the industry level. The second thing was around providing in-demand services for small businesses, everything from communicating effectively and frequently about what's happening in a fluid environment, giving critical health guidance, remote access to our business solution centers, our 18 Workforce One centers around the city, webinars, and all those things. And so, we've been on the front lines, really preparing and implementing those resources, Jeff, that responded to the needs of small businesses. So far, just quickly, I'll just say this, we've already delivered over 110,000 services to small businesses, helped them get about $130 million in state, local, federal funding, We open up a hotline because folks are like, how do we get to you? How do we come through this? 55,000 plus small businesses have engaged us on that. Webinars, trainings for small businesses, almost 50,000 there. And the list goes on, 5 grant programs, 2 loan programs. So this agency has shifted tremendously. One thing that a lot of folks don't know really about SBS is that we also run the Workforce One and Workforce One centers of the city. And when we think about a million people being out of work at one point, 500,000 now, a little over 500,000, we already helped about 75,000 unique job seekers with our Workforce One centers, connecting them to jobs, over 9,500, and really $17.52, which is huge because it's $2.52 above the minimum wage. So we're getting people good quality jobs and connecting them even during the pandemic to these resources. So that's what we've been doing as an agency, a lot more, dozens of programs, both for workers and for businesses. And of course, for our neighborhood corridors, because we manage all the bids, the business improvement districts, the 76 bids across the city. So we've been very busy getting our city to recover and come back.
I'm just stuck on the 17.52 an hour. I think a lot of folks might want you talking to Joe Biden and getting some change at the federal level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We support that.
Carl Rodrigues, Chief of Staff to Deputy Mayor Vicki Been, is also on the call. Carl, want to throw it to you. Vicki is the Deputy Mayor for Housing and Economic Development. So what have you and your office been doing during the pandemic?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. So we've been focused on a variety of things. Sort of classically, the work that we work on the economy is sort of the more macro solutions. And I think, at one point, SBS reported to the same deputy mayor shop that I work in. And SBS is sort of on the other side of it, let's call it micro and, moniker of small. And, I think one of the things that we've been super focused on is actually working hand in hand with SBS and figuring out how do we focus and reassess where our resources are going, because the small end of the world has been disproportionately impacted. You can look across the city and the big businesses have more or less adapted and sort of taken this all in stride. The vast majority of the white collar workforce has very seamlessly worked from home throughout the pandemic. Some people have worked from outside of the city, and it doesn't really affect a large swath of the New York City workforce. And so some of the programs that Jonnel mentioned are the same programs that we've worked hand in hand with SBS to make sure that they hit the road quickly and effectively. One of the first things that I worked on almost a year to the date was, in the first week of March last year, the mayor pulled everybody into the Office of Emergency Management. It was a, sort of roundtable with FD, PD, OEM, and basically all of the mayor's senior staff to figure out what are we going to do and how are we going to handle this. And very quickly, it became clear that we were around the corner from having to shut down the economy. And what would that mean for, the smaller operations in the city? And so, within 7 days, the mayor had already sort of recognized that small businesses were going to need help. And that first weekend, it was, I think, the weekend of March, like 6th or 7th, we were already working between EDC, SBS, the law department on how to put up a loan and grant program. And that was 7 days in. And, I want to say 2 weeks later, the program was accepting applications, and we got something just from those first 2 programs, like $25 million out the door. So I think one part is absolutely a focus on small business, and that in our portfolio has a breadth of spaces that we focus on. So the mayor's office of media and entertainment also rolls up to the deputy mayor. DCLA, the cultural agency for the city, also rolls up to the deputy mayor. And so we've been similarly focused on how the pandemic has affected these institutions. Some of them certainly are large You've got the MoMAs of the world, you've got the metropolitan museums of the world, but you've got a lot of smaller institutions that operate, look, and feel much more like a small business and that don't have the resources. And so with DCLA and MOM, we've been, again, similar to the work that Jonnel's been doing, advocating hard with our federal delegation to make sure that there are resources in these packages at the federal level that are specifically targeted to help the culturals and libraries, zoos of the world that are going to play a huge part in the recovery of the city, because they've always been the sort of lifeblood of New York. New York, if anything, is a cultural epicenter, and so that's sort of the other side of the coin in our shop, which is how do you make sure that people want to keep coming to New York, and then how do you make sure that New York is a place of opportunity? Like, I moved here and my career has been shaped by this city, and I want to make sure that it remains a place for other people to, have the ability to sort of grow and enjoy the city. That's it.
Absolutely, and we're definitely going to be talking about tourism later in this discussion too, for people that are coming, short term to New York and keeping the interest. I want to throw to Kate Cocklin, who is the Deputy Counsel in the Office of the Counsel to the Mayor. My question is, how often do you get people confused that you work for the City Council and not the Council to the Mayor? But also broadly, what do you do? What's your role in the pandemic? And explain the Council to the Mayor.
Yeah, sure. So not as often as you would think. I think the I makes all the difference in the council versus the council. But we're the Office of the Counsel to the Mayor. What does that mean? That means we are kind of equivalent to the White House General Counsel. So we work on the most sensitive legal and policy issues that come before the mayor. Anything you see in the news that the mayor's office has worked on, our office has probably been involved in some way. But aside from those big policy issues and legal issues that our office handles, we're also the general counsel's office. So that means, we review contracts, we look at ethics questions, and the more typical general counsel work you see.
Great, and I also want to introduce Bess Chiu, who is the Chief of Staff to the Counsel to the Mayor. You may see, based on the green paint in the background, you guys work together in the council's office. So I want to throw to Bess Chiu and ask what role has your team been playing in the past year?
Thanks, Jeff. So, as Kate mentioned, we are similar to the White House Counsel. During the pandemic, we have been working very closely with Commissioner Doris at SBS and with Carl and with Deputy Mayor Been, on a number of issues, including the ones that they've already mentioned. But I guess a couple of the key things I really kind of want to highlight in terms of what we've been working on is, as many of you may know, the role of the executive has really been magnified during the pandemic. We've been governed through executive orders, both at the gubernatorial level from the governor and from the mayor. And our office drafts every single one of those emergency executive orders issued every 5 days by the mayor. Although at the beginning of the pandemic, you may have seen we were issuing them, a bit more frequently. And so as part of that role, our boss, Kapil Langani, who's the counsel to the mayor, he works very closely with his state counterpart, the counsel to the governor, to clear executive orders through them and really to coordinate, the legal issues that we're all faced with today. And one other thing I want to highlight, because I do think this is unique to kind of the role or how the counsel's office role has changed a bit during the pandemic, is that we have taken on a more public-facing role. I mean, we're on this panel today, but also, with all these new rules and regulations from the state, we've seen the need to kind of break it down and to provide clearer guidance to members of the public, because there was a lot of changes and there continue to be a lot of changes, especially now as we're moving into reopening. And so we actually, which I think is unique for a legal office, we did create more of a social media and public presence. We have a Twitter account at NYC Mayor Council. and a website, nyc.gov/counsel to the mayor, where we do post frequently asked questions that simplify the guidance that's coming out and hopefully has been helpful. Or as we've seen, I guess, with some of the data, that it has been helpful to members of the public. And we post short videos with questions, in addition to working very closely with our colleagues at SBS on various guidance to help members of the public.
And a podcast. The other night, I was cooking dinner, listening to the Counsel to the Mayor's podcast in an interview with Manhattan DA Cy Vance. It was enlightening. It was great. So,
well, thank you for highlighting that. I forgot to mention it. So we have a podcast, City Hall Pass. And it really is another opportunity for people to see what's going on at the city. Our last episode, which we released last week, was with the New York City Emergency Management Commissioner, Deanne Criswell. I think it's really interesting, not just to hear, from a public servant who cares so much about the city, like the other panelists here today, but really, what the city has been doing. And, frankly, I grew up in New York. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I, read all the newspapers and I follow everyone on Twitter. But I do think it's helpful to kind of give people kind of like a peek behind the scenes as to how decisions get made and really how we're all keeping New Yorkers at the forefront of every decision we make here.
For sure. And well, look, like I said, I was cooking dinner the other night, but many nights I don't cook dinner, because I live in New York and I go to restaurants. I take out, I go out, whatever. And that's how a lot of New Yorkers are, very much experiencing small businesses and small businesses struggles and triumphs over this past year, eating out. So that's the first topic I want to jump in, and I'll throw it to Kate first. Tell me, what are the current restrictions on restaurants in New York? And then as a follow-up, just how are restaurants being told about these restrictions?
Yeah, sure. So as many of you know, indoor dining just reopened at 25% capacity. Some other restrictions include, wear a mask when your server comes to the table. The time that indoor and outdoor dining was recently extended until 11 p.m. And on the subject of outdoor dining, I just want to say that's something that our team worked on and we are really proud of. It actually took a lot of legal work to make the program as successful as it is. So for example, those outdoor heaters that you see, before this year, those propane heaters were actually illegal. But now they're commonplace at all restaurants. And, especially in this winter, they're critical to outdoor dining. And I think they're also helping provide restaurants with business because now folks can eat outside even when it's 24 degrees and snowing out. And now the outdoor dining program has become permanent, which is really great to see. And hopefully this does provide some relief to these small businesses that we've talked so much about. And on the note of restrictions, you can find our restrictions on our Twitter account, NYC Mayor Council, and also on our website, nyc.gov/Office of the Counsel to the Mayor. And on that website, we also provide FAQs. So how late is indoor and dining open till 11 p.m.? Those kinds of questions.
And more on that, Commissioner Doris, you're obviously working closely with these restaurants, these small businesses. Is every restaurant getting mailed a packet that tells you what you can do, can't do, or how are you communicating directly with them?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. A large part of what we do here as an agency is communication and making sure that we're getting the word out as rules change, as the law change, as policy shifts, that everyone understands it. So, we take that work very seriously. We engage in direct outreach with our restaurant owners through our SBS Food and Beverage Industry Partnership. We also, of course, work with the New York City Hospitality Council and the Food and Beverage Small Business Roundtable membership that we're a part of. So there's constant industry outreach. And beyond that, even going as further with the Hospitality Alliance, NYSRA, New York State Restaurant Association, ROAR, the Latino Restaurant Association, Bar Association, et cetera, et cetera. So we're certainly making sure that we get to all their membership through their leadership, but also we do direct contact with restaurants and small businesses, 220,000 small business owners we communicate multiple times a week with. We also have 76 bids across the city, as you know, representing 100,000 folks who are employed by those bids or impacted by the work that they do. We are very much engaged in getting the word out to them and in different languages. Another thing that we started to do right at the beginning when everything started to open up was corridor tours, and walking through the corridors, meeting with businesses one-on-one, handing out flyers, giving them direction. We've done 73 of those already around the city. I've done 35 or 36 of them myself. Again, in the height of the pandemic, when uncertainty was there, when we first started to reopen, we were out in the field. And then lastly, I'll say that, we're partnered with our city agencies with interagency webinars and training and outreach with Carl's team at MOM, the nightlife office there as well. We are making sure that we sort of disseminate this information in every venue and avenue that we have and can do so, including webinars that we do many times a week. And again, training different groups, our Women Entrepreneurship Program, our Black Entrepreneurship Program, MWBE program, our small business programs, getting the word out so that folks know what's happening in every way that we possibly can.
That was dinner. Now it's time to move on to the show. We want to talk about Broadway. That's another way that New Yorkers really engage with the city. And of course, people from all over the world come here. When will it return? I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was kind of this, they're announcing that the theaters won't open until September, and then it kept getting pushed back. What's our sense? When will the shows be back, and what'll be different? Then I'll ask Carl about that one.
Look, I don't have a hard date. I will say that, like so many other things, the key to that is absolutely how quickly can we get vaccines out. That is, of course, the sort of broader answer to how do we get the economy restarted. But for Broadway specifically, I think, one of the things that's been sort of fascinating about all of this process and the pandemic generally is just having to dive into different industries and understand how they actually work. And Broadway is obviously unique industry and so homegrown to New York. But really, the economics don't work in a world in which, like we actually just heard earlier this week, where the movie theaters are opening up at proportional 25% capacity with a further limit on a per person basis. That's not going to work the way that Broadway works, right? These are extremely expensive productions. They're expensive for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of people who have to prep every day. There's so many people backstage, and you just are not going to be able to have a Broadway show at a max of 50 people in a theater built for 200, 300, 400, 500 people. So really, I think the key in that is going to be a successful vaccine program, and to get over sort of the hurdle for when people feel comfortable being in spaces that are much more cramped than anybody's been used to for 10, 11, 12 months.
Yeah, and just to jump in there, I remember when Broadway closed, we actually drafted the executive order that forced Broadway to close. And I actually had tickets to Moulin Rouge that night. And so drafting the executive order, knowing I wouldn't be able to go to Moulin Rouge was sad. But obviously, that was what the public health experts at the time were telling us, is that you have to, close these large venues. So I think once the public health experts provide us with different guidance, I think we'll look there too.
I have been waiting 11 months to see West Side Story. I had tickets.
It was really good. It was. Yeah. It was really good.
Don't spoil it for me.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I really do hope that the show opens up again when Broadway opens up again. That they have a chance to return, even if the young actors might not be quite as young anymore. Yeah. But speaking of that, I mean, look, Broadway is such a driver of tourism, such a driver of the theater district, hotels. I want to ask about hotels. I've been watching a lot of mayoral forums, and this is always a question that comes up. All the candidates have an idea of what to do with these hotels in New York that are currently either sitting empty or being used to house the homeless. I think this is a question for Carl in your office. How is the city thinking about hotels that are closing or vacant over the past year?
Totally. So I think this is a really challenging one in the sense that you've got to look at it over a particular timeline, and you've got to figure out what your timeline is. For us, we think the city will be back in short order. What exactly a short means, we're hoping that by this time next year, we're like almost all the way there, if not kind of just back to normal New York. Again, we'll have to see how the vaccines roll out, et cetera. But a world in which where you're 12 months away, or targeting at least to be sort of back to normal, kind of limits the, call it, the breadth of what you can do with these assets that are currently empty. At the end of the day, we think we're going to need these hotels back because we're going to have tourists back. The city will be back. Broadway will be open. And so as much as it in a sort of short-term way is reasonable that people are trying to figure out how do we repurpose these assets, you can't just turn a hotel into something else and then expect to turn it back into a hotel when we're going to need those hotels again. And so I think what we're really trying to figure out, are there certain assets that are really so upside down that it actually does make sense to forever and permanently turn it into something else? Because you're only going to get one shot, right? If you turn every single shuttered hotel into something else, no matter how sort of laudable that cause might be, that hotel is never going to come back, or it's not going to come back for 15, 20, 30 years, depending on the nature of the financial deal that was sort of necessitated and structured. So I think what we're trying to figure out is, how do we get, again, back to normalcy as soon as possible? And what limited universe of buildings that are empty or vacant can be repurposed, because that is sort of a good way to use, again, that limited set of assets that makes sense. I will say that there's been a lot of buzz about transitioning these assets, but we have not found very many owners, really banging the door down saying, I want to turn my hotel into whatever is sort of next. It's extremely expensive to take an asset from one thing to another thing. Even if you're taking it from sort of like a nightly stay sort of program, which is a hotel, to more classic residential housing, right? Like a hotel room does not have a kitchen, and you have to go in and pipe a whole building for a bunch of kitchens. That's a lot of money. And so again, these end up being very permanent decisions, and we're trying to find a way to make sure that the city and these, empty hotels or empty office buildings are there when we come back, because the city will be back.
Right, and to be explicit, I mean, I know there's been some discussion about kind of bringing back SROs, single room occupancies. Is this more of a question for like the state legislature, or is this something that the city could do or is even considering?
On the SRO part, it couldn't be done without the state legislature. Some of the rules are at the state level, and so there would have to be some relaxation of rules at that level, which are being discussed. The governor has some ideas out, the legislature has some ideas out. Again, I think in some limited ways, there's probably a problem and a solution that sort of matches against each other. I think in a very broad way, it's probably solving a problem that doesn't exist, or at the very least won't exist in short order.
This has been more enlightening than certain mayoral forums I've seen, so I'm glad on that point. I do want to talk a little more about tourism. Basically, look, I'm lonely. I want my friends to come visit. Can tourists come to New York right now? Are tourists coming to New York right now? Kate, I think this is a question for you. I mean, what are there restrictions on if you fly into the airports? I haven't left in a while. I don't know.
I haven't left in a while either, but you don't need to leave New York. That's the great thing about New York. But yes, your friends can come into New York. If they're coming from a non-contiguous state, then they'll need to quarantine for 10 days. The good thing is the state recently introduced a test out option. So what does that mean? That means basically if you take a negative test 3 days before you arrive in New York, and then you test negative again on the 4th day, you can leave quarantine, assuming you aren't otherwise sick. And I think the messaging has been pretty good actually it's been great around this. It's been something our team has really focused on is these quarantine restrictions, because even when I just said that's not, not everyone would know that. So it's really been important to get at that messaging. So one thing we did again was an FAQ, but for this FAQ, it's available at nyc.gov/travel. And it was such a great FAQ that the state and the city posted it on digital billboards as you're coming into the city. So you can see our FAQ live. It's pretty cool. Other things we've done is through literature. We have folks at Penn Station, various airport choke points and checkpoints as you enter the city, passing out literature, making sure everyone knows of these restrictions that, if you're coming from a non-contiguous state, you need to quarantine.
This actually has me thinking, if you are vaccinated, can you flash your, I'm vaccinated card to TSA once you get to the airport and you're kind of free to go, or do you still have to go through this quarantine process? Do we have an answer for that yet?
I think you still have to quarantine, but I would need to double check. And that guidance would be available at our website or on our Twitter page at NYC Mayor Council.
Yeah, you still have to quarantine. I think, we had this discussion actually with Jay Varma, who's our health expert. And at the moment, I think the issue on the public health side is that it's not clear that while you won't get very sick from a vaccine, it's not 100% sure that you can't transmit the vaccine. And those are two different things. And so the flashing of the card is not necessarily something that people feel from a health perspective comfortable rolling that kind of program out. But there's a lot of buzz about it, and perhaps the science will back up such a program in short order, hopefully.
Yeah. I've learned that the vaccination seems to be much more of a societal thing than a individual thing. So I'm sure we'll get some answers on that as this vaccination system progresses. Now, one of my favorite things in the past few months has been looking on Twitter on like Sunday morning, and there's always a post from the New York City Sheriff's Office posting like a 2 a.m. raid of an underground club. There's all these photos of like bleary-eyed people, like what's going on here? They're not wearing masks. It's crazy that this is happening. But enforcement, what is the mayor's role and the city's role in enforcing COVID restrictions? And I guess I'll start, with specifically these like underground clubs, very obviously breaking the rules, that we can expand beyond that. And I think this is a question for Bess.
Yeah, so actually our office has worked very closely with Sheriff Joe Fucito. I think what you mentioned with these, Sunday morning kind of tweets or news stories, I think fortunately for us, and really because of the work that, SBS and the mayor, our community affairs unit, other elected officials, the media like yourself, Jeff, because of the education that's really been put out there, as the mayor has said, the city is only enforcing where absolutely necessary. So really in those types of outrageous cases, like you mentioned, Jeff, but otherwise what we're really focused on is education. The vast majority of people, of businesses, they comply once they're made aware of what the regulations are, which is why, I know SBS and our office has worked so hard to put out, easy to read, translated, simplified guidance. One example, wearing masks, that was not a thing before 2020 in the United States. Now you can buy designer masks, but at the time, I mean, no one wore them except for those in the health profession. And now, I mean, I take the subway, I'm here at work. I actually have I'm in a room by myself, which is why I'm not wearing it, but I have my KN95 mask. Everyone's masked up, people are double masking, they're really complying with the public health guidance. And so our team, while we do work closely with the sheriff when there are kind of these more egregious situations, we may have to work to do something like help them issue a cease and desist. For the most part, we are very focused on education, and like once people know what to do, we've really seen very strong compliance.
Yeah, and I want to follow up with Kate. I mean, you're talking about this difference between enforcement and just kind of giving a warning. Where is the line there? I mean, we've all seen restaurants where you walk by and you're kind of like, that looks like technically you're actually indoors rather than outdoor dining. What do you do, and how do you decide how to enforce here?
Yeah, so I think just to echo Bess, it really is about education, getting the message out there. We have seen in large numbers that folks are complying with these rules if they understand them. I think that's, again, why messaging is so vitally important. And the reason our office has evolved is, to Bess's point, if everyone knows they have to wear a mask, they wear a mask. If everyone knows they can put propane heaters outside for outdoor dining, they're now putting propane heaters outside of dining. For here, it really is just about, I think, education. And we've really seen excellent compliance really across the board. And I'm really proud of Newark for that.
I want to throw it to Commissioner Doris. I know that SBS. I think you're more a department that helps small businesses. Luckily you're not the one that has to be laying down the law, enforcing. What ways have you been helping small businesses that have been financially struggling? I mean, what programs are there available, and what's been the best one? What have business owners really appreciated the most in the past year?
Well, Jeff, let me just go back a little bit on the summons part. Look, if you're a small business out there, just really want you to know we have our small business advocate team who work with our small businesses right now to help them sort of navigate the process if they do get a summons. And we also have our compliance advisors teams who go out and also added another component to their work called virtual compliance consultations. We've done several hundred of those already, where we work with businesses to make sure that they are compliant. All of this is free of charge. You can call our hotline, 888-SBS-4NYC. If you do have a summons, if someone did come to you, if you were given one, we're right here to help you sort of navigate that process. And again, back to the fact of the education is so important. I think, it's so important for us to understand what the rules are. Please go to our website, nyc.gov/SBS, and all of the information that we have available, all the webinars, the trainings, the simple, correspondences that you can look at to make sure that you are doing the right thing. I think it's important. And I think once we get the word out, like Kate said, that folks are generally compliant. And we want to make sure that if you do run into any kind of difficulties with summons and so forth, SBS, we're here for you. We do not give summons, etc., but we do help you when that happens. And I would say, as it pertains to financial assistance and support, we understand that during this time, our work is really to hold small businesses over until we are able to fully recover. And in part, we've been, Carl talked a little bit about the loan and grant program. By the way, the first in the country to do that. Before the federal government did anything, before the state did any programs, anything like that, New York City was number one, the first out the gate. And we're very proud of that program. 4,000 plus businesses are engaged in those two programs. So we're very proud of that particular program. We also had another series of grant programs, another 4 grants, another loan program. We just launched an LMI storefront loan program, which we have out now. We also have an interest rate reduction grant. If you are a business owner with a CDFI as one of our CDFIs as one of your lenders, we will buy down the interest to zero on that. We're saving, we're helping hundreds of businesses do that right now to reduce their business debt so that they can continue to come back. But one of my real favorite moments was when we were able to help small businesses with the emergency grants that were eluded during the unrest earlier in the year last year. And when they were looted and their stores received damage, and we were able to put together a program very quickly. And the mayor visited out in the Bronx with us on Burnside there, and we walked up and down the corridor and saw and heard from small businesses and said that, we need to do something. We were able to get, grants in the amounts of $10,000 a piece out to those small businesses to really help them, with their security systems, with putting the, fixing the glass, that was broken, or locks, etc. I mean, that to me was one of our most favorite programs, because the direct impact it really had on those businesses who had no fault of their own, were vandalized, and we were standing right there with them during that time.
For sure, and I want to remind all of our attendees, if you have some questions, please throw them in the Zoom Q&A. And if you're looking through the Zoom Q&A, press the little like button on the questions that you like, so they go to the top and I see them. For example, the question at the top right now, I want to follow up on this discussion that we're having about how to help small businesses. Somebody's wondering what to do about businesses that have opened opened after the pandemic started, ones that opened in March 2020 or later. They seem to say that a lot of the small business programs, they're not eligible for them because they're so new. Is that true in the case of these SBS programs? Is there anything available for newer small businesses that have opened since the pandemic and are obviously struggling already?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And you mentioned earlier, some of the challenges we're seeing with some businesses having to close or really put their business on pause for now. At the same time, we're seeing businesses are opening. I think a New York Times report was out late last year about businesses also opening at a record pace, and like we've never seen before. And so it's a challenge. The federal programs really dealt a lot with what happened before the pandemic, and that's a challenge. And we've sort of communicated that to the new administration that we needed to find opportunities to support businesses that are opening now as well, to make sure that they have the resources. SBS has 40 lenders that we work with. And every year, between $60 and $70 million, we work with those 40 lenders to get out to small businesses. That network is still there. And we are there to help supplement that process to get any kind of financial assistance that those businesses need. We also have our resources here at SBS to help you start and open your business, help you with the various agencies that you have to work with. We have, again, our compliance advisors, our small business advocates who are right here on the ground, will support you in establishing your business and getting things going. So while I think most of the existing programs are challenging in the sense that they're trying to address, obviously, the catastrophic financial challenges businesses are facing now on top of the health crisis that we're dealing with, I think, SBS existing resources and programs, which we do every single year, irrespective of the pandemic, are still available to small businesses.
Absolutely. And I hope that helps all frankly, the brave small business owners that have opened up this year. So, we need these fresh businesses. I do have one more question from the Q&A that I think is good for Kate and Bess. I know that the counsel to the mayor loves nothing more than intriguing legal questions. Somebody was asking if you can smoke in outdoor dining restaurants. The new outdoor dining pop-ups. There's obviously a ban against indoor smoking in New York City. Do we have an answer here? Are these areas smoke free, or since it's outside, can you smoke a cigarette?
I don't think you can. Again, we'll add that to our FAQ, but no.
Yeah, that seems like one you might need to study the legal history and get an answer on it. I don't know. It was interesting.
It's an interesting question. It's something I hadn't thought of, but yeah, especially those indoor or outdoor dining structures, the answer's no. But we'll confirm and add to our FAQ.
There you go. And speaking of this FAQ, I want to ask you all about public messaging. It's such an important part of government in this past year. Always, but especially in this past year, has been getting out the right messages, making it clear, making it straightforward. I guess broadly, and I'll ask Jonnel about this, is what are best practices for small businesses when it comes to I guess to messaging, to whether that's to potential customers saying that it's safe to eat, it's safe to shop, or when it comes to wearing a mask, being safe indoors, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I thank you so much. Yeah, one of the things we want to encourage, of course, is make sure that folks feel safe and they understand the challenges of the small businesses themselves, and making sure that they comply, and so that everybody's compliant. To effectively communicate with their clients, we're encouraging all business owners, number one, you've got to increase your online presence. And that's so important. Right now, we're in a new era. And this new era means that we have to have a viable online presence. And we've sort of began several programs right now to sort of address that for small businesses. We do have training for small businesses to get online and to have their digital storefront. But also we launched a training for your employees program, which we provide no cost online training to help these businesses and their employees with courses like, computer applications, Zoom, Microsoft 365, Google Workplace, all those things, online marketing, e-commerce, what to do there. And then, of course, how to communicate effectively to COVID safety, food and beverage business regulations and stipulation to your customers, again, making them feel safe. And then we also partner with Deloitte to launch our small business recovery playbook. And part of that, it sort of articulates, again, how to communicate effectively, but also how to respond, how to recover, how to thrive during this time. And we also let folks know, look, it's important that you engage us, again, to make sure that you're taking full advantage of the resources that are free and available, such as our webinars that deals with how do you transition your business to e-commerce, how do you effectively communicate. We've worked also with another big firm, MasterCard, and their Digital Doors program, and dealing with getting, again, our small businesses online, get them the needed support about how to communicate effectively, and let them understand what the resources are. And we continue to say, hey, you gotta maintain the core four. Stay home if you're sick, practice social distancing, wear a face covering, wash your hands. We have our PPE marketplace for small businesses. And of course, if you need any help in understanding what you need to do to properly communicate your business, to market your business, you can call us right now, and with somebody's on the other end at our 888 number, to help you. So 888-SBS4-NYC. That's 888-727-4692. We're absolutely ready and able to help you figure out how to effectively communicate to your clients.
And Jonnel, I think also this would be a good time to plug another SBS-led program, Open Storefronts, which our team worked very hard on. And basically what this program does, and Jonnel, you should definitely elaborate, is allows storefronts to sell their goods outside on the street, which sounds like something that's like super easy, but there are actually a ton of laws that we need to suspend to make that happen. And I know we also worked really close with SBS thinking through issues like kind of what does outdoors open storefronts mean? Does it mean having your cash register outside? Does it mean having seating outside? Does it just mean putting items outside? SBS in our office really had to work through kind of thinking through all those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have such creative programming, and I think one of the things that we discovered during this time is that we're all work for government, and we appreciate some of the rules that are there. Some, of course, were there before we even thought of joining government or even participating in government, and they were set in the time that they were set. And I think what we've learned. Also as government that we also need to pivot, right? And I think goes back to what Carl was talking about earlier about sort of, the function of government and what we are and what we provide during this time, be it a macro or sort of on the micro level, whatever it may be. We've got to think differently. We've got to think about our public spaces. Are we utilizing every inch of our public spaces to engage in bringing our economy back? Are we doing that to keep people safe? Are we rethinking the way that we actually look at our city? When we think about all of the things that represent New York City, are we doing that in a different way, and are we being creative? And the open storefronts, the open restaurants program absolutely is an example of how we can do that. Cut the red tape out, bring creative solutions, do it quickly. The first time we were out, I was out in the Bronx, and when we launched this program, and I walked into a store, and they said, how long would it take me to actually apply for this thing? It's like literally less than 5 minutes, and they got an email, they printed it out, and there was, put that thing on their door, and that was it. I mean, that's the kind of efficiency that we need. And going forward, we're doing everything we can to make sure that becomes the norm and not the exception for New York City.
That is a true success story, dealing with government and getting through it quickly and easily. So bravo. Another question from the Q&A I found interesting is talking about outdoor dining versus indoor dining. And of course, there's an understanding that this is there's a trade-off here. There's a delicate balance between health concerns of telling everybody, please stay home, keep your distance, and economics of people wanting to keep their businesses alive, wanting to support small businesses, that sort of thing. Particularly for the council's office, for Kate and Bess, I mean, how are you making these decisions over the past year of balancing health and economics and finding the right answers?
Sure. So I'll start, and then, Carl, Jonnel, feel free to jump in. I mean, the number one thing is, all along, the decisions that we've made have been done with the advice of our public health experts. So we fortunately have, the best public health experts, I think, in the city, and, really great ones at the state as well. And every decision that is made does have to do with that. I think most folks are aware, but it's the governor, it's the state who decides, who issues the guidance on on indoor dining. I think the governor has said this a few times as well, when the positivity rates have changed, that's when, things are changing in the city as well. But again, number one thing, I mean, we are really focused on public health guidance, but certainly also working with, Deputy Mayor for Housing Economic Development, with SBS, with all the stakeholders to kind of to do those balances, frankly.
And you mentioned working with the state. I mean, that's been, a topic through all of this. How are the city and the state coordinating on all of these? We happen to be the largest city in New York State. I don't know if anybody's noticed. Actually, the largest city in the country. Kate, how are you working with our state government and also federal, if there's any interaction there?
Yeah, so our office coordinates daily with the state. Our boss, Capella-Ngani, counsel to the mayor, talks almost every day with his counterpart in the governor's office. And one, it's seeking clarification on something the state has put out. And two, it's also because of our executive orders. So in March, the governor revoked our authority to independently issue executive orders without state approval. So every 5 days, when we want to, issue an executive order that maybe has something new. So for example, outdoor dining, that had to be approved by the state. Open storefronts had to be approved by the state. So we really, really are in close communication with the state. And then I will let maybe Carl, you can speak to our close working relationship with the feds.
Yeah, same. I would sort of describe it similarly where on the federal side, they're not really dictating our day to day. That's more or less either local or at the gubernatorial level of sort of like what a New Yorker feels like the rules are. Our interaction on the Fed side has been much more about stimulus packages, how to sort of resolve the problems from a financial perspective. And then to some extent, and I personally haven't been privy to this, on the health side, again, Jay Varma, the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, et cetera, are in touch with their counterparts on the federal side of the latest health guidance, et cetera, and making sure that it's a two-way street in the sense that the feds are hearing from the city, how would such a rule actually work in a city of 8+ million people?
Another question from the Q&A, and I don't know if Lorraine Grillo herself is in the Q&A, but somebody's asking about the COVID recovery czar. De Blasio just announced yesterday a new position. Lorraine Grillo, longtime city government expert, will be taking on that new role, leading COVID recovery. Have you guys, anybody met with her yet? I mean, what role are your offices working with her and her team, and how is that going to fit in to this puzzle?
So I can jump in here. So we have weekly recovery meetings with the mayor, and the idea is that the recovery in and of itself straddles so many different spaces, and it can't really be done just in the small business sort of side of the world narrowly. It can't be done in the housing and economic side of the world narrowly. It can't be done, for what it's worth, in the health and human services. So you've got 3 different deputy mayors that are working through items, and that's just on sort of the, call it, most intuitive spaces. But then you've also got Deputy Mayor England, who's in charge of operations, where all the things that Kate has been talking about of open storefronts, right? It's been a lot of wrangling with like FDNY and DOT to figure out what the rules are. So Lorraine's gonna, and has an experience of doing this, come in and sort of be the glue amongst all of those shops and try to figure out how to cut through all of the different perspectives and try to come quickly to resolution on things that are hard for different reasons, right? It goes sort of to the question earlier about, how do we think about indoor dining? It's that ability to have somebody there to kind of wrangle through and to be able to take the health side of the issue, the economic side of the issue, and sort of quickly drive to consensus and make sure that we're being as quick and as sort of nimble as possible.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly add, yes, we've already communicated with Lorraine, who is a friend for many years, a fantastic public servant. I'm super excited. We've worked on so many things from him. And Jeff, you may know from the MWBE world, the small business world, her work at SCA, DDC, we've already communicated and have plans already to continue the work here. So we're excited that she's in that new post.
Absolutely. I want to once again thank Affinity Health Plan and the East Midtown Partnership for supporting this event. And hey, if you like this one with City and State, I want to recommend a few events we have coming up, a few webinars. On Thursday, just a couple of days from now, we have a ranked choice voting webinar focused on Manhattan. We're going to have some mayoral candidates that are going to join in and take some questions, and we're going to talk all about RCV. That's free. Check out the chat now for the registration. Then on Friday this week, along with Crown Castle, City and State is hosting an event on the economic benefits of 5G. I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theories about 5G. I think we're talking about the real facts about 5G. That's also free. Check out the registration in the chat. And next Friday, March 5th, City and State is hosting a state legislative forum with AARP, where we are focusing on the supportive services for the aging population in the city. That's at 10 a.m. And again, check out the chat for the registration. So again, I'm Jeff Colton with City and State. I really want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Jonnel Doris, Commissioner of the Department of Small Business Services, Bess Chiu, Chief of Staff to the Council to the Mayor, Kate Cocklin, Deputy Counsel to the Office of the Council to the Mayor, and Carl Rodrigues, Chief of Staff to Deputy Mayor Vicki Been. Thank you guys so much for joining, and thank you to all of our everybody for watching on Zoom and Facebook. And hope you can join us again next month for our next event with the Council of the Mayor, talking about coronavirus update. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.